From the Blind Ability Studios, it's Wellness Wednesday with your hosts, Beth Gustin and Robin Ennis.
The etiquette is also just as important when it comes to language and conversations and having the awareness to ask a person's preferences, having an awareness to apologize when we do get it wrong, because we will get it wrong.
At the end of the day, I think that it's all about intent and where you're coming from, and you can't really truly please everybody, and somebody may get offended. Why is the default to always be more harsher on ourselves and offer other people more grace?
Right, because we are just as worthy as anybody else to be spoken to kindly.
Hey everyone, welcome to Wellness Wednesday. My name is Robin Ennis, a licensed clinical social worker in Colorado, and I am with my co-host, Beth Gustin, a licensed professional counselor also in Colorado. And so today our topic is going to be words matter. Words matter along with tone of voice, as well as etiquette, right? Like just all three of those different topics about how we interact with each other and the impact that it can have on navigating interactions, potential friendships, families, relationships.
Yes, and it also impacts how we interact with ourselves. So I'm thinking about self-talk and how we talk to ourselves, how we portray ourselves to others. And so I do think this is both inward and outward. And being a totally blind person myself from birth, I pick up a lot on tone of voice, probably more than I should sometimes. But I get most of my cues from a person's tone of voice.
Yes.
And it can really make or break a situation or a conversation depending on how something is said.
I'm glad you said that, Beth, because I really do interpret people's tone of voice. It's not like I'm analyzing you or going down that path, but rather you can tell a lot by the way that a person fluctuates their voice, their pitch, whether they're sad or frustrated or angry. And so I really do pay attention to those cues as well. I think that since I can't see the nonverbal cues, then I do have to pick up on the verbals, what I hear, whether somebody is fidgeting, tapping their finger against the desk or their pen, different things like that to kind of give me an inclination on how they're feeling or what's going on. For me, different terminology, right, can impact the way that a person has a certain tone towards me as a therapist. Like, for instance, in terms of words, I'll use disability as an example. So there's two different types of language that people like to be referred to. And there's identity first language. So some people like being called a blind person or just blind or disabled or autistic. Some people like to be called, whereas other people it's called person first language. So some people may rather put the identity descriptor second. So a blind individual or an individual who is blind or a person who is blind. The whole concept behind person first language is to try and see the person for who they are versus their disability. And the identity first language comes from, my disability is a part of me and I'm proud of it. Not saying that people who use person first aren't proud of their identity, but that's the main focus of why people use identity first language. And so you can tell whether or not you're using right descriptors or references for people by their tone of voice, right? If their tone of voice is more short or sharp, maybe they're offended by a certain word phrase or something like that. And so it's just always good to check in with people and model whatever is going on with the interactions, help guide you on what words or terminology to use.
Or if they become really dismissive and change the subject, that's another clue that we may have misstepped and misspoke or offended somebody. I think it's always important to start a conversation with, what do you prefer? So even like with pronoun choice, what do you prefer? What are your pronouns? Or if like their full name is like Christopher, do you prefer to be called Chris or Christopher? What would you prefer I call you? The same is true, I think, when it comes to person first versus identity first language. What do you prefer that I use when I'm talking with you or about you? And just getting that person's initial answer, because that can set the tone for a whole conversation and really help it get off on a better foot.
Yes, we're human, right? So if you make a mistake with somebody's pronouns or with referring to somebody that they may not want to be referred to as, it's okay to say, oh, I'm sorry, right? And then correct yourself and use the correct terminology they use. Try not to be overly hard or critical of yourself because, moving forward, all you can just do is be present in that moment and respect the person's wishes and try to adjust from there. I know that can be a thing too, is people feel guilty for messing up if they think that they did in that moment.
A lot of this comes down to etiquette. And I know we typically think of etiquette, at least I do, as far as maybe getting some support through a buffet line and how can a person, give you good descriptors and have good etiquette as far as navigating a situation like that. But etiquette is also just as important when it comes to language and conversations and having the awareness to ask a person's preferences, having an awareness to apologize when we do get it wrong, because we will get it wrong, like Robin said. But etiquette encompasses a lot more than just choice of words and tone of voice.
Yes, I agree. It's all about etiquette is how we treat other people and just being respectful. And so Beth, let me know what you think about this. Is I was doing a presentation last summer. And so in terms of etiquette, the class was wondering, what do you think about the word blind spot? Are you offended by that if somebody would say that to you? And honestly, when I think of blind spot, the first thing that comes up is driving a car.
Right. Yeah, me too.
Yeah. And see, I'm glad you said that. I was like, well, I don't think that's offensive. That's just an analogy that I heard is that you can't see the other car when you're driving. And so I think that can go along with etiquette, right? Some people I think can overanalyze if that's possible. But I think, Beth, you hit it right. It's just really checking in with the person and seeing what works best for them. And if you feel like you've offended them, then it's okay to say you're sorry, because at the end of the day, I think that it's all about intent and where you're coming from. And you can't really truly please everybody, and somebody may get offended.
I agree. And I think about etiquette a lot too when I'm thinking about if someone's offering me assistance, etiquette fits in with that too, because hopefully the person will ask us how they can best assist us. Mm-hmm. And then we have a chance to respond to what's going to help, or if we don't want the help. But I also think it comes into play when people just walk up and try to be helpful. And it's kind of a breach of etiquette, if you will. And so it goes back to everyone's well-intentioned and the intent is good. But the bottom line is do check in with the person, no matter what side of this you're on, to see what makes sense for them.
Yes, I agree. Especially the help thing regularly comes up. Yeah, it's okay to, like we've mentioned in a few podcasts before, it's necessary to create boundaries and limits. It's recognizing those limits and boundaries that you yourself have set up, and also too, or, if you're listening and wanting to help somebody, recognizing what boundaries they have into place, right? And coming to an understanding. That's how you can best help or serve somebody, is knowing what somebody else's limit is and knowing when you've overstepped those limits and correcting yourself and stepping back.
Exactly.
And so you'll, again, come across this, especially navigating the holiday season and interacting more with people, but being patient with yourself. And Beth, I thought it was really good how you mentioned too, is not in this podcast, but you mentioned in general is that it's important to recognize not only how you talk to other people, but talk to yourself, because you are around yourself 24/7. So the way that you talk to yourself, it really matters. So be gentle and kind in that realm.
It does. And the tone of voice and with which you talk to yourself matters too. If I say, I don't understand why you're having such a hard time with this. I mean, come on, you know how to do this. Versus, wow, it sounds like you're having a hard time accomplishing this. Let's take a step back and figure out why you're stuck. I'm talking to myself. But those two examples demonstrate the difference in how I'm going to receive that feedback from myself.
Yep. Talk to yourself like you would talk to a loved one. That's what I constantly remind my clients is,
Me too.
Well, how would you talk to so-and-so? Yep. It's a good one. And it causes people to really step back and they're like, oh, well, yeah, that's a good point. Because I would talk to other people more kindly than I would talk to myself. And I'm like, also to think about, well, why is that? Why is the default to always be more harsher on ourselves and offer other people more grace?
Right, because we are just as worthy as anybody else to be spoken to kindly.
Yes, I agree.
And as always, if you have anything that you would like us to talk about, any questions you'd like us to answer, anything at all, you can give us a call, you can send an email. We do get those and we do respond.
Yes, and we really want to hear from you. So let us know what you're thinking.
Please stay grounded and take care.
Until next time.
You can send Beth and Robin a message at 612-367-6093 or by email at info@blindabilities.com. They'd love to hear from you.
When we share
what we see through
each other's eyes, we can then begin to bridge the gap
between the limited expectations and the reality of blind abilities.
and the realities of blind abilities.